Hey guys, this is the second video for Algebra 1A Unit 2 Asynchronous Session. So a quick review on intercepts. Remember that an intercept is a point where the line, the graph of your equation, passes over an axis. So if it's passing over the x-axis, this is an x-intercept. If I had a line that went like this point right here where it passes over the x-axis is the x-intercept. Okay, so visually it's pretty easy to see. Again, you just look for where it's crossing that axis, and if it's a point crossing the y-axis, it's a y-intercept. If it's a point crossing the x-axis, it's the x-intercept. For the purpose of what we're doing today, we are really worried about, or really care about, the y-intercept, because we're going to be working into putting things in slope-intercept form. And the intercept part of that title, slope-intercept form, is a reference to the y-intercept. So looking back, this is the picture I showed you in the last video. If I asked you to find the y-intercept on this graph, you would look at the y-axis, which you can see is this line here, the y-axis, and you would ask yourself, where does this equation cross the y-axis? And we can see it's crossing right there. So it looks like this is happening at about 0, because the x value here is 0, and maybe I would say 3 1/3. So this is approximately the y-intercept of this equation. Now I want to do a little bit of practice with y-intercept. And when we look at slope-intercept form, which we'll get into in the next video, there's this variable called b. b is the y value of the y-intercept. So I'm going to show you a few examples so that you'll see what I mean. So I'll have this graph looking like this. We'll do a line like this and maybe a line like this. Okay, so in each of these examples, we're going to look at what the y-intercept is and what the value of b is. So b is just a variable, it's just a number, whereas the y-intercept is something with an x and y coordinate. So if I look at this first graph, I'll label these graphs maybe A, B, and C. If I look at graph A and I want to know the y-intercept, I'm going to ask myself, where is this graph crossing the y-intercept, or the y-axis rather? And I can see it's happening in here. It looks to me like it's at about 4.6. So the y-intercept then is 0, 4.6. 4.6 is the y value, 0 is the x value. Any point lying on the y-axis has an x value of 0. So if the y-intercept is 0, 4.6, b, as I said, b equals the y value of the y-intercept. So b is just then equal to 4.6, the y value of the y-intercept. Let's do this again with the second example. So you can see in this graph B, the line is crossing the y-axis right at about, I would say, 0.9. So the y-intercept is at 0, 0.9, and the value of b is just 0.9. Let's do our last example. It looks like this is crossing the graph right at about 3. So our y-intercept is at 0, 3. Our value of b is 3. It's very important that you understand that an intercept is an ordered pair. If you were answering a question like in a workbook and it said, what's the y-intercept, and you just typed in a 3, that would be incorrect. You know, imagine if I asked you to plot the point 3. You wouldn't know where to put it because you wouldn't know if I meant that 3 was the value of x or the value of y or the value of both x and y, right? So a y-intercept is a point on a graph, so it must have an x value and a y value. b, on the other hand, is just a variable that stands for the y value of this intercept, and it's a quantity that we'll be using in the formula in the next video.